Here is exactly how you can make your own cheese plush from code GEASS. I knew right away when I decided to cosplay C2 that I wanted to make a cute little prop that is also relevant to the series. I've seen people sew their own CHEESE-KUN plushes before, but I knew for myself that I didn't want it to be flat, since when we do see it in the anime and we see C2 hugging it, you can tell that it's really round and really squishy looking. It almost looks like a cylinder or a tube, rather than two pieces of felt being sewn together in a flat way, and she's even able to use it as a bit of a rounded neck pillow. The first thing I did was upload everything to PowerPoint. For the base design, my friend sent me along a design of her work, which was a flat sketch, and I uploaded it into PowerPoint because I don't know any other illustration software, and I used this to clean everything up and thought about how I could make it 3D. I thought of the design of CHEESE-KUN as a very long tube that I could then split up into 6 pieces vertically. You'll need to cut out 6 of these. They're long rectangles with one end being pointy like a triangle and the other end of the rectangle being rounded like a circle. You can cut out 6 of these rocket ship shapes and then cut out one 6-petal flower that goes at the bottom where the cheese feet are. Next, I went to Fabricana, which is my go-to fabric store, where I picked up all of the yellow fabric that I needed. I was initially looking for minky, but since there was no minky fabric, I went home with a yellow fleece. Remember to always pre-wash your fabrics before you start sewing, so they can smell nice and it also gets rid of any shrinkage. Once I pre-washed and traced my patterns out, it was ready to pin and cut. I like to draw my patterns by placing them onto the fabric with weights on top, and then tracing on top of the design with a Sharpie or a highlighter. After that, I can pin it if needed and cut it out. This was relatively easy to cut and sew, since it's essentially just straight lines with some curves at the end. I chose to cut some of mine on the diagonal so that I could save fabric, but you don't necessarily have to. It does help to save fabric if that's one of your goals. You will also need to map out the size and the location of CHEESE-KUN's face. He basically has a cute little face with eyes closed and his mouth is shaped like a 3, so you'll need to plot that out onto the fabric where it's going to be and the size of it as well. When I'm working on a project like this, I like to make sure that I have lots of table space, a lot of pins, and my sharp fabric scissors on hand. Using sharp fabric scissors is really helpful for fleece because it is a thicker fabric. It's also helpful to use pattern weights to hold the fabric in place while you're cutting. These are some other things that you'll want to be aware of when you're sewing with fleece. Fleece is sensitive to heat, so use a low heat setting or don't press it at all. Also, fleece doesn't fray, but if you do decide to finish your seams, it can help to reduce bulk and give it a cleaner finish. You can also use a smaller seam allowance so it doesn't look as bulky. It's a relatively dense fabric, and it's best to use a universal needle. CHEESE-KUN also has 2 tiny hands that look like flippers. Those are basically triangles that you can cut out. You have to remember to trim the edges of these triangles before flipping them back to being right side up. Otherwise, the point might not be as pointy as you'd like for it to be. The little triangles, flippers, hands are going to be stuffed before you sew it on. So you can do this sewing part by hand, which is what I did. So once I flipped it right side out and stuffed it with polyfill or cotton stuffing, then I closed it up with a hand stitch and then sewed it onto the body of the cheese, which at this point wasn't sewn closed yet. I'll show you in a moment what all of the rectangles look like once they've been attached. So at this point, we're done the body and we are done the hands. The next part is to sew CHEESE-KUN's face. For the face, I tried machine embroidery for the very first time, and I did this by drawing the design on with Sharpie, tracing it with a stencil, and then threading in some black thread into the machine and then stitching it in. Machine embroidery is really helpful for adding beautiful designs onto your fabric, and one thing I would recommend is testing or practicing beforehand. So I used some scrapped fabric to practice my embroidery, and once everything was all done and I sewed together all the pieces, it is ready to be stuffed. I made it nice and smushy with cotton that I had stolen from another stuffy, and once the cheese plush itself is done, it's time to make the hat that CHEESE-KUN wears. He wears a fedora hat, and I used some black fabric to make this, but the black fabric was just a scrap fabric from my scraps bin, and I cut out shapes that would be similar to a hat, so donut shape for the bottom, and then rhombus shapes for the actual head portion of the hat, and then another oval on top. Though I wasn't completely satisfied with the first way that all of this came out because it was a little too flimsy just being made of fabric. And that's why I used foam to make everything thicker and more durable. I sewed the foam directly onto the fabric for CHEESE-KUN's hat. Once I was wearing the entire cosplay together and using the cheese as a prop, it was so much fun because CHEESE-KUN is really comfortable to hold, and I pre-washed it with a laundry detergent that I really like, so he smells really good too. At the end of the day, this made a really good prop because the cosplay just looks extra iconic with the Pizza Hut mascot. I would recommend doing this sewing project even if you are a beginner sewist, since it is beginner friendly. It cost about $18–20 in materials and it took about an afternoon. After the entire photo shoot, as usual, my friends and I went out for dinner, and this time we chose a Korean restaurant, which was delicious. And of course, we had to get desserts as well at the end. My makeup looked pretty worn out at the end of the day. You can see that I had my lenses on all day along with the green eyeshadow. And here are some of the final photos that were edited and sent back to me. These are the photos that I posted on my Instagram, and I hope you like them.